and welcome to Feasting on Faith with Sheila. It's hard to believe, but we are in our last chapter in our series on Ruth, but it is a good one. You know, we already know in chapter 3 that Boaz told Ruth not to fear, that he would take care of her. But you know, when he went in to start checking into how to become her covering, then he found out that there was another kinsman that was a lot closer to her than he was. So, according to the Jewish law, then that man had to have the first offering. And he, of course, said yes because he wanted that Naomi's property. And you know, we find out that just because Ruth stepped in and she surrendered herself to Boaz, her life could have changed. From this moment forward, she could have had to go to the other kinsman, regardless of what she felt and regardless of what she wanted to do. Can you imagine the fear in her heart? The brokenness once again that her and Naomi felt because finally someone had chosen Ruth again and she saw hope in her future. But that surrender that she gave to Boaz that night was in question now. You know, in chapter 1, when she left Moab, you know, she left with a heart broken and she left with nothing. But yet, when she went into the field to work and when she went to the threshing floor, when she surrendered herself, then she thought that all was going to be okay. But something else had to work. You know how the enemy comes. Even when we think we've got everything worked out, the enemy still shows up and a lot of times throws something in to mess us up. But we have to realize that even in all of that was going on, God was still watching out for Ruth. He was still there. Her father was still present, and he had not turned from her. You know, from Ruth comes King David, and from King David's lineage comes Christ. So God was not going to give up on Ruth. But Ruth didn't know all of that about her future. She just knew the present and the day. But you know, God knew, and he was ready, and he was already in work in the future, working on that bloodline that he was going to bring out. Ruth could not see it, but God did. But so Boaz went ahead and went to the city gate. That's a lot like our courtrooms of today, where we go if we have legal issues, you know, needing attorneys and so forth. You go before a judge. Well, they went before the city gate and they all met and talked things through, and they all made decisions on property and on what needed to be done. And I'm sure that Ruth was standing off to the side. She may have been crying because she did not know what was going to happen that day. She didn't know what she was going to have to walk through and the consequences that she was going to have to bear on top of all of her hurt and her loss. You know, we do the same thing. We don't know what our next decision is going to be. But because there was another man in the picture, Ruth couldn't do a thing. She had to do what the law had said. But in all of that, we have to remember that the Father was watching for Ruth. And because she had surrendered to him, he had her life in his hands. And he had chose her, and he was going to bring her to the end. But I'm sure she didn't feel that security right then. And she was waiting for them to tell her what was going to happen in her life. But as it turned out, the man decided that the property was not worth the cost of taking on two widows. He did not want to take Ruth as a wife. And so he decided to say no. And I'm so sure that Ruth's heart just leaped for joy because she thought, yes, there's still hope. But she still had to wait. She couldn't go in and say anything. But then Boaz stepped up. And he said, I will redeem her. I will take on her responsibility. And he publicly declared that he would take her past, her present, and her future. And he would take care of Naomi. Ladies, that's just like God. That's grace being shown to us through our God, our Father. You know, grace does not ignore our stories either. It steps in and protects it. It covers it. It doesn't say fix things yourself before you come to me. He just says come and say, I need you to redeem me. And just as Boaz, he will say, I will. And he did. He died on the cross for us. The Father was watching every moment of Ruth's life. And he wasn't forcing Boaz. He wasn't making him do it, but he was still working with him and his heart. And he was willing to step forward. He was willing to obey God Jehovah because he felt that urgency. You know, we are not defended because we're strong. We are defended because he is strong and he stands for us. I have a small story that I want to end this lesson with, because our Father, ladies, is always watching. He already knows our future. He knows our past. He knows our present. He knows what we need, and he knows how to fix it if we will surrender, just like Ruth surrendered at the feet of Boaz. We have to surrender at the feet of Christ. That is what he's asking of us today. And this story, I know you have seen it. It is the story about Simba. And you know, Simba was just a little cub when he ran away. And he was so afraid. He didn't have anybody and didn't know anybody, didn't even know where he was. He ended up in a cave. And it was dark and dreary. And it was storming outside. And he was so afraid. And he was hungry. Just think about this little cub and how it represents you. You know, sometimes we go into our caves of sorrow and loss and mistakes, failures, things that we wish we had never done or that had never come to our door. And we are afraid. We are like Simba. You know, when he was in there, he was alone. And sometimes we feel that too. And he just began to shake in that damp cave. And it seemed like the walls were vibrating with the thunder and the lightning and the rain. How many times have we felt that in our lives? And Simba was so afraid. And then he began to hear the hyenas coming. They were laughing. They were telling him he was useless, that he was worthless, that no one could love him, that he was going to be alone. They would tell him that he was small and insignificant and that he would not survive, that he would not get out of that cave alive that day. How many times has the enemy told us that we are not going to make it, that no one loves us, that no one cares, and we feel alone? But you know, sometimes we get a little bit of bravery. We get a little bit of hope, a little bit of encouragement. And we stand up and we roar against the enemy, just like Simba did. But you know, his roar was so small. And then he could still hear the enemy laughing, taunting. The hyenas getting closer and closer. They were circling him and mocking him. Oh, and how sometimes we remember how the enemy does us. But ladies, we have to know that our Father is still watching us. We have to know he's behind us and he's on either side. He's in our future. We're not alone. Just like Simba's father. He is always there. You know, Simba tried to roar. He tried to make it sound like that he was a huge lion and that he could destroy the enemy. But he was so small that it just caused them to laugh harder. And then all of a sudden, when Simba thought all was lost, there came a mighty roar behind him, a huge roar that vibrated the cave walls. It shook the ground, the paws coming behind him. But he knew that roar. He knew that was Mufasa. Mufasa, his father. That's how we have to know. When the enemy comes and he throws those mistakes and those failures, those broken parts, that loss, he brings all of that to us. Just remember that our Father will come to our rescue just like Mufasa did for Simba. He could hear him coming. And then the hyenas began to scatter. The echo in the cave vibrated that roar, and all of the hyenas heard it, and they began to run. It wasn't because Simba was strong, but it was because his father was. That's how the Lord is with us. He's with us daily, just like he was with Ruth, leaving Moab, coming into Bethlehem, working in the fields, going to the threshing floor, going to the city gates. He was with her, and he came for her, and he changed her future. You know, we don't need to be afraid of what's coming because we know that our Father will take care of us. Our Father is watching us just like Mufasa was watching Simba. And when we go into our threshing floors, and we have to lay down all of this problems that we have, we know that the Lord will take them. And you know, some of us have regrets and some of us have failures and we have broken pieces. But our Father is there and able to take care of them. And he will always come, just like the dad with the little girl and the bicycle. And just like the dad with the little lion cub, our dad is with us. Our Father stands behind us, and we have no reason to fear. So any of your problems, just make sure, bring them, surrender them at the feet of our Father, and let him take care of them for you. Remember, he's watching. And let's end this in prayer today. Father, just as you positioned Boaz to stand as a covering over Ruth, you stand over us with strength and with protection and with your redeeming love. When we feel exposed and uncertain and unworthy, remind us that we are not alone in our fields and in our threshing floors, but we are seen and we are chosen and we are adopted and we're accepted and redeemed by you. Let your roar rise over every fear and every lie that comes into these ladies' lives. Teach us, Lord, to rest at your feet, to trust in your provision. Thank you for being our Redeemer, and thank you for covering us with your covenant love. We are yours today. We have been redeemed. Praise the name of the Lord. Amen. Bye-bye.